Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Paranormal, the show where we're going to explore the unexplainable. Last week I talked about a friend of mine who told me his stories from when he was on the police force. This week I've got another set of stories actually from two people. It's actually a couple that I'm very close with who has had some very interesting encounters through their years. So this is actually going to be 4 stories in total. So we'll jump right into it. First of all, I'm not going to use their real names. They didn't want me using their real names, so instead we'll call them Elliot and Nicole. So this first story is actually Nicole's first story. Now, Nicole actually lived in upstate New York. This is back in around 1998, and she was young. She was around 10 years old when this happened. And it was an older house they lived in. It was her parents, and her 2 sisters that were both younger than her. So she would constantly experience stuff going on in the house, cabinets opening, doors slamming, stuff like that. But there was one experience she had when she was 10 years old that really made her believe in the paranormal. So what happened, one night she was babysitting her 2 younger sisters. And she was just sitting in her room when all of a sudden she saw her second youngest sister walk by her door. Now, the way the house was set up is all 3 of the daughters had their own room upstairs. And so the staircase is right here. Nicole's room was here. And then her 2 younger sisters were away from the staircase. So in order for either of them to go downstairs, they would have to go by her door so she would see them leaving. And since she was babysitting, they were both supposed to be asleep. She saw one of her sisters walk by her room, start heading down the stairs. And so she called out to her, saying, "Hey, what are you doing? You're supposed to be in bed right now." Her sister proceeded to walk down the stairs. She heard and saw the lights turn on and heard the TV turn on. So at this point, she's wondering why her sister is not listening to her. She gets out of her bed, goes downstairs. As soon as she turns the corner into the living room, TV turns off, lights turn off. There is no one else in the room with her. So obviously scared, she runs back upstairs, checks, and both her sisters are completely asleep. So at this point, she ran back into her room, closed the door, obviously terrified. But that was Nicole's first experience with the paranormal. Now, Elliot's first experience with the paranormal is a little more sinister. So this is back when he was 7 years old. I've got my little footnotes here. So back when he was 7 years old, so this is about 1995. And he was visiting his cousin who lived in Sacramento, California. One night, they were both sleeping in his cousin's room, and his cousin didn't really have a bed frame. The way he explained it to me is more of just a mattress sitting on the floor, and he was sleeping next to where the mattress was. So in order for him to get up and leave the room, he would have to walk over Elliot, which would obviously prompt him to wake up. So one night, they're sitting there, and it's middle of the night, and Elliot wakes up to his cousin walking over him, going into the hallway, going to the bathroom. He said that his cousin got about halfway to the bathroom when he heard a noise that he could only describe almost like he was trying to scream, but he didn't have any air in order to scream, so kind of like a gasp, I guess you'd call it. And his cousin comes running back into the room, jumps over him into the bed. Elliot tried to find out what happened. He wouldn't tell him. He was completely shaken from the experience. So the next morning, Elliot asked his cousin during breakfast what happened. The way he described it, he was walking to the bathroom down this hallway. He said he was almost at the hallway. He was about 10 feet away, and it was pitch black. All the lights were off, and he saw a figure appear in the doorway, and it was darker than the hallway, which was already pitch black. So this pitch black figure in the dark hallway is standing there in front of him. And as he's staring at it, it lifts its head and opens its eyes to reveal 2 blood red eyes staring directly at him, which prompted him to make the noise and run back into his room, terrified. So this is about a year later. Both Elliot and his cousin both went to visit another cousin who lived in Oakland. So they were there, and all 3 of them were talking, and the cousin who lived in Oakland had mentioned that down in their basement there was a closet that they felt was haunted. So the 3 of them, trying to be, I don't know if they were trying to see what would happen or explore the paranormal for themselves, they decided to run downstairs. They go into the closet, and they turn off all the lights. And they're sitting there. Nothing's happening. So Elliot decides to try and taunt whatever's down there. And he says to it, "Is there anything even down here?" As soon as he says that, immediately the already dark basement starts to become even darker and immediately becomes freezing cold to the point that all three boys were shivering. At this point, they're all looking up and they see the same two blood red eyes come from a pitch black figure, which of course prompts them to throw the door open and run back upstairs. So these are the experiences that caused Elliot to believe in the paranormal. Now, fast forward to 2010. Now, in 2010, Nicole and Elliot started dating. They were both living in Nevada. They were living around Reno, Nevada. Now, they both lived in separate households, but quite often Nicole would go and spend the night at Elliot's home. Now, apparently there was a spirit that lived in this house, and it would only attack the men in the home. It was Elliot and two male roommates, but the way they described the house to me was it was a pirate party house. So constantly they were always having people over, having big parties and being loud, and you know how you would being a college kid. So, and all of these experiences would be shared by all the men living in the home. They would wake up in the morning having almost the same dreams. They would all hear stuff. They would all have crazy things happen to him. Elliot, for example, was explained to me. He would have lights turn on and off constantly, but what creeped me out even more was he said that on multiple occasions, right around 3 a.m, he had a radio in his room. The radio would turn on full blast to a station that he wouldn't even listen to, not even a genre of music he would listen to, but it would just come on completely full blast, waking him up. Now apparently this home, the previous owner had actually committed suicide in the master bathroom. And Elliot had a dog. The dog would be terrified of the master bedroom and the master bathroom. Every time they would walk by, the dog would stare at the bathroom and growl. Its hair would stand up to the point that Elliot would have to physically pull the dog away from the room. So one night while Nicole was spending the night with Elliot in his home, in the middle of the night, she heard Elliot saying something about he couldn't breathe. She looked over and she saw a dark, hazy figure that was hovering right over his chest. And as she was staring at it, it just started to disappear. And Mike explained that he actually had a dream that there was an enormous weight sitting on top of him. He couldn't really explain what it looked like. The closest thing he came up with was something like an anvil was sitting on his chest while he was asleep, and he woke up still not being able to breathe. So when she woke up, she saw this, and it slowly dissipated. And again in the morning, he went and talked to his roommate who had the exact same dream that night. So another experience that the two of them had together while they were staying in the home. One night around 3 a.m., and Elliot was really adamant about this, that it seemed like every time something would happen, it would be around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, which obviously has significance for anyone that hasn't looked into paranormal happenings before. But every time it would be around 3 o'clock in the morning. And one night, Nicole and Elliot were sleeping in his bed, and they woke up to what sounded like something getting dragged in spurts across the living room, which was a hardwood floor. And they explained it sounding like it would drag a little bit and it would stop, and it was this dragging noise and then it would stop. But because it was a party house, they assumed that someone was up and drunk and just doing something stupid in the home. Turns out they finally got irritated with it, got up and walked out, and their dining room table had been dragged approximately 3 feet away from where it was sitting. Everyone else in the home was completely... So finally, it got to the point where Nicole reached out to one of the other roommates' mothers, who was a very spiritual person. She was able to get them in contact with a spirit guide locally in the area. So the spirit guide came in and had them all sit down on the couch. He closed his eyes and just kind of sat and thought for a while. And finally he looks up and asked them, "Well, this is a party house, isn't it?" And they all prompted a laugh. Not really knowing what else to do, but they explained, "Yes, we have parties quite often." He said, "I've never experienced this many spirits in one area." He also explained it as when you invite people into your house, if they have entities attached to them, they will come in the house as well, and sometimes they'll get lost in that area. And this is exactly what was happening in their home. Apparently, the reason they were having all these occurrences was due to the previous owner who had committed suicide in the home. He was very angry about all these people in his house. He was unaware that he was actually dead. And when all these other spirits started coming in, he essentially got angry and became more powerful and was actually suppressing these other spirits and holding them in this home to make him the strongest spirit in the home. And he was the one causing all these occurrences in the house itself. So the man told them that he would have the ability to take these spirits away. So he sat there and started talking to them. And up until this point, a lot of them thought it was just a hoax, or he was just making something up. But the thing that really, especially Elliot, said it convinced him, was he said a few months prior that they had a friend that they could, or an acquaintance that they could only describe as a gypsy that came and stayed at their home. This guy he didn't have a house. He was just a wandering nomad, essentially. But the gentleman, the spiritual guide, was sitting there talking to him, and he turned to him and said, "You had someone by this name," and he gave almost the gypsy's exact name to him. And he said one of the spirits said that that's who he had come with. So after that day, after he talked to these spirits and he kept saying, I will guide you out of this, I will take you out of here, he apparently took them all wherever they went, and they didn't have any more experiences while they stayed at that home. Now this final story of them is much more terrifying. This was a much more malevolent entity that was plaguing them in their first home together. So this is back in 2013. So they moved into this home, and it was only Elliot and Nicole. They lived in this house together, and it was their first home living together. No roommates, anything like that. And when they moved in, apparently the home next door was a historical landmark for the town, which was also in Nevada. I won't give the town, but it was a historical landmark for the town, but it had been burned down. Because it was a historical landmark, it was kind of in this gray area where they couldn't actually destroy the home, but they were able to condemn it. So the home just sat there, burnt and looking terrible. So Nicole and Elliot didn't like this house very much, but the first year they were there, they threw a Halloween party. They had a bunch of their friends come over, and apparently two of their friends got drunk, wandered over to this condemned home, and they actually took some stuff out of the house and brought it back into their home, which prompted Elliot and Nicole to be very angry, especially considering what they had just dealt with back at Elliot's old place. So as soon as they brought this material possessions back into their home from this condemned house, every single night they would have something happen to them, and it seemed to specifically focus on Nicole. It would go after her, pretty much only her. Every night they would hear footsteps, heavy footsteps, run down the hallway toward their bedroom, come in the bedroom, and it would sound like it stops directly over Nicole. And it was loud enough to the point where it would wake both of them up every single night. And they said it happened at 3:15 almost every single night that they lived in this home. The same occurrence would happen day after day. They would wake up hearing this thing run, and every time it sounded like it stopped directly over her side of the bed. And they had the door open because at this point they had two dogs, both of them had a dog, and neither of the dogs would go and step foot inside that room. They said that, again, they would have normal occurrences of cabinets opening and closing, light switches turning on and off, to the point that they would start to turn on and they would stay awake waiting for them to turn on so they could go turn them off again and again and again, as if it was just a repeating occurrence. So one night, after staying there for quite a while, they didn't hear the footsteps. Instead, at 3:15 in the morning, Nicole woke up to feeling 5 fingers grab a handful of the covers on top of her leg and pull the covers off of her, which completely terrified her, obviously. She told Elliot, it's fine, don't worry. So the next day, again, they didn't hear footsteps. This time, they're both laying in bed, and Nicole wakes up feeling 5 fingers on a hand, again, this time underneath the covers. The hand proceeded to grab onto her leg, at which point she turned to Elliot, woke him up, and said, "Someone's in the house." And as soon as she said that, Elliot witnessed her drag to the end of the bed. And at this point, they decided they had had enough. Nicole took the mattress, dragged it out of the bedroom, put it in their dining room. So they slept in the dining room for almost a week. They had almost no occurrences happen for a week straight. So on I guess it'd be the 5th day, so they had 5 days with nothing, no paranormal occurrences in the home. And then finally one day, Nicole was starting to fall asleep. She had barely slept for a week because of what had happened in the bedroom. So she was starting to fall asleep, and she started hearing Elliot laughing. So they're just laying on the mattress in the middle of the dining room, and he starts laughing hysterically. She said it didn't even sound like his voice that was laughing. So she turns him over. He turns his head, and his eyes are wide open. He's just laughing directly in her face. So she is terrified at this point. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. She's terrified at this point, grabs him by the shoulders and shakes him, and his eyes slowly close and then opens back up. He's like, "What are you doing? Why are you shaking me?" She explains to what happened. He says, "No, there's no way that just happened. I was asleep." So finally, their last straw, the following night, they're sitting there, they're starting to fall asleep, and Nicole has a dream. And she's kind of halfway between that point of being asleep and being awake. And she has this dream of a man standing in her kitchen. And the way their kitchen was set up, it was a kind of like a giant U shape. It was a very large kitchen, had cabinets and drawers everywhere. And the man turned on all the gas burners from the stove and then blew the kitchen up. So she woke up as soon as it exploded the kitchen. She wakes up and every single cabinet and drawer in the kitchen, which she said was well over 30 cabinets, were all swung wide open when she woke up. So this was her last straw. She and Elliot had enough of this. So they tried to reach out to the spirit guide that had helped them previously. Unfortunately, he was unavailable to help them. So she got terrified and ended up going online looking for help. She was so scared at this point that she said she would start crying every day when she would have to leave work, knowing that she was going to have to go back to this house and deal with whatever might occur that night. So finally, Nicole came across somebody that she felt could help them. It was a gentleman named Aldwin Trapman, who I'll link some of his stuff below in the description. So if anyone else is having crazy experiences from them, he seemed to help them immensely and rid their home of this malicious entity. So if someone else is watching this and is having a similar occurrence, you can feel free to contact him at his website. But she had found this guy named Aldwin. She got a hold of him. She said they spent well over an hour on the phone together. She gave him her address. She gave him pictures of the inside of the home. She sent him all kinds of stuff. And he said that he was actually able to help them remotely take care of this entity. He also explained to them that what they were dealing with was not a spirit like they had in the previous home, but this one was actually demonic, or somewhat demonic in presence. At least that's how it came off. And Aldwin said that he would deal with entities or hauntings or curses, whatever. He deals with all of this using angels of light. And both Nicole and Elliot are not religious people, but they had no other place to turn, so they decided to go with Aldwin. So Aldwin actually would start sending them updates. He said every day he would call them and let them know what was going on. And every single day they would have to sage their home, and every single entrance, every window, every doorway, everything would have to get saged. And while they were saging, I'll actually find what they said. While they were saging, they would have to constantly say, "Anything that is not of the light, we do not accept you, and by the power of the Archangel Michael, please leave." So they would talk to them every day. He would tell them essentially a status update of their home and what was going on. Nothing happened for 2 days. On the third day, they're sleeping, and right around 3:15 in the morning, again, light turns on. Terrifies both of them. So they wake up, they turn the light off, and that was it. Nothing else happened that night. So the next day, they get up, they're doing their business, and Nicole calls Aldwin, who Aldwin is located in Toronto, Canada, and they're all the way in Nevada. So she calls him, and before she can even say anything, he says, "The light turned on in your room again last night, didn't it?" As if something was there watching, and he was aware of what was happening in their home, being across the other side of the continent. And he said after that, they kept in contact with Aldwin for a while, but he was able to rid their home of this malicious entity. And since then, they have had no paranormal experiences. Yeah. Thank you guys for checking this out. This was a terrifying set of stories for me. Again, because I know these people personally, I believe everything they say. They're not the kind of people that just say something for attention. And I know they don't just go around sharing this story. Almost never. So big thanks to them. But if you guys have had similar experiences, or if you've ever experienced anything paranormal, please feel free to hit me up, both at the email or the Facebook for this channel. I would love to get in contact with you, hear your stories, possibly even put it up if you would like to get your stories out there. Thank you very much. If you did enjoy it, please go ahead, subscribe, like the video, and check out the social media, the Facebook, all that stuff. But until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Have a great day.